Roosevelt Scarrett, and the CARICOM Secretary General, Ambassador Owen LaRock. Let me also say a special welcome to representatives of the media from the region and beyond who have joined us for today's event. The welcome is also extended to the people joining us on television and on the various social media platforms. Let me first invite the Chairman, Prime Minister Rowley, to make a statement to the press conference.
Thank you very much, moderator. Welcome to all those who are listening on our local and regional and international platform. We have just concluded 2 days of deliberations at the level of heads of government and our associate delegates, where we have had the opportunity virtually to deliberate and make decisions on a wide-ranging number of issues. And this evening I have with me on the platform, I'll be hoping to have President Ali with us later on, but I have with me a colleague, Prime Minister of Dominica. I would just like to mention a few of the things that the headings that we have adjudicated upon and where some decisions would have been made. As is to be expected, a little later on this evening, the Secretary General of the Secretariat will issue the full communique, which will contain all the decisions with some details as to what they carry. So within, I would say, the next hour or two, that should be available for members of the media. But we did spend a lot of our time on access or unavailability of the COVID-19 vaccine, the CARICOM single market and the economy. We had some extensive presentations and discussions on agriculture, tourism policy, security issues, reparations, and some border issues that came from our territories of Guyana and Belize. We also had the pleasure of entertaining presentation from President Moise of Haiti, where there's some instability or reports of instability at this time. And those are the main headings that we deliberated upon. So if I just leave it now for you to guide us through, I may be able to say a bit more, and my colleagues might be able to say a bit more in response to your questions. So I pass back to you now, moderator.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just for some guidance to the members of the media, you're asked to use the raise hand icon to signal your interest in asking a question. When called upon, we recommend that if you're in a position to do so, you put on your camera and state your name and media house before proceed with your questions. The floor is now open to questions, and I see Edmund Campbell. Please proceed.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr.
Campbell.
Campbell.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Here, Edmund Campbell here from the Cleaner Company. Just a few questions, starting with the issue of the University of the West Indies. May not have been discussed, but may I ask what steps, if any, will be taken by CARICOM states to address the serious financial fallout at the UWI in light of the impact of COVID-19 on the finances of the regional institution? And Dr. Rowley, as you indicated, you had declared earlier this year that the region must look at making full use of the CARICOM single market and economy as our principal means of recovery, having been hit hard by the COVID pandemic. Now, would you share with us the concrete steps to be pursued to advance the CSME this year? And the final question would be, is CARICOM working together as a collective to lobby for COVID vaccines for CARICOM states? And what's the specific strategies that are being employed?
Okay, those are a lot of questions. Let me just answer the first one quickly. We did not discuss UWI financial situation at this meeting, so I couldn't give you any information on that as having arrived at out of these proceedings. However, with respect to the CARICOM single market and economy, we did receive a major presentation from Prime Minister Motley, who leads that aspect of CARICOM's efforts, and we agree, we accepted that the COVID intervention and our distraction by COVID and challenges did prevent the momentum that we thought we had going with respect to the single market and the economy. But we did agree to review the entire consultation and decision-making process at all levels in the effort to establish the most effective strategy for effecting increased levels of implementation. Heads agreed with the responsibility for the CSME, Prime Minister Motley, and we followed each state. Heads of government mandated the Council for Finance and Planning, the COFAP, to meet within the next month to resolve outstanding issues and reach agreement with respect to CARICOM Financial Services Agreement, the CFSA, the Regional Securities Market, the Community Investment Policy, and credit reporting. Heads urged the removal of non-tariff barriers to trade among member states and the implementation of simplified administrative procedures for free movement of people. We also took a decision to prioritize the establishment of a single ICT space and advancing the digital economy. We set some deadlines for that, in that we commanded a report by end of March, such a report to be so detailed as to allow us to make some decisions after deliberation at our meeting in July, which is scheduled to take place in Antigua. And the Council for Trade and Economic Development, quoted on ICT, has been tasked with advancing the requisite action. So we have also we received a report in the Commission on the Economy, and we adopted that final report on the CARICOM Commission on the Economy. The report contained a prologue which set out a 12-point action plan in response to the COVID-19 global pandemic. And it agreed to the early publication and circulation of that report, which you will have access to in the very near future. The intention is to encourage region-wide debate on the recommendations within the context of the economic challenges and prospects of the community. And there's these discussions are to be facilitated by the chairman and members of the commission. So we did do a lot, and one of the outstanding things that we spent a lot of time on was the whole question of our effort to find more financial resources to fund the post-COVID recovery. We agreed with the presentations from the leader of the CSME effort that when we approach multilateral agencies seeking financial support, they usually ask or would like to see what resources we are able to mobilize within the region to be accompanied by what we are seeking from their end. And invariably, we are resource short. And Prime Minister Motley has been championing and has got the agreement of this conference that we should take immediate steps to operationalize the coming into being of something that we call the CARICOM Development Fund, meaning that if we are able to have a development fund that pays some reasonable return, we should be able to attract finance from the region, which we know exists. If you look at our banking system, we would see that we have a fair amount of cash in the bank. But in terms of mobilizing that for development, we are not as aggressive or as attractive. But we want to do that without such a development being a strain on the national treasuries by way of having to provide sovereign guarantees for that. So we decided that we would explore the possibilities of looking for aid in the form of securing those guarantees which will generate the foundation on which such a fund can be launched without it becoming sovereign guarantee expansions of our debt liabilities. And we intend to proceed on that line, along that line, and we've identified assignments for a small committee of CARICOM heads to do a roadshow seeking to encourage persons to assist us in that particular endeavor, which would have the outcome of increasing the financial resource base of the CARICOM region. I think I missed a question. I answered two of them, but there was a third one somewhere. If you can remind me, I'll probably be able to assist. There was a third question there, was there?
That would have been the UWI question that you said the meeting did not discuss.
Yes, we didn't discuss UWI finances at all in this in this meeting. And
okay, thank you. I now recognize. Oh, sorry. I now recognize Colville Munzi.
Before you go on, though, I think that the question that the Prime Minister Trinidad would have missed would have been any position on collective purchasing of the vaccines.
Oh, the vaccine, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes, that was
given
a
the
major
fact that the COVAX.
Yes.
Sorry,
okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. I knew there was another major question there. That in fact was our first and primary engagement at this conference. Yes, we took decisions to firstly, in fact, we are issuing a very strong statement that will come out later in the communique. We're issuing a statement on our concern and dissatisfaction with the way we have been literally squeezed out of access to vaccines. We know that there's a world shortage of vaccines, but what had been put in place to allow countries like us to have access to the vaccines have not been working along those lines. And the end result is that at this time, we have only had, fortunately, one gift of 170,000 vaccines within our region. And up to now, we have not been able to access any other, even though we now know and anticipate with great expectation that in the next few days we will hear when we will get our first COVAX. But we must understand that the COVAX initial tranches or quotas are but a small part of our needs. And in attempting to find access ways to either receive donations or to purchase from manufacturers, the only thing that has happened along those lines is that we've got some commitments to some territories from India to keep on, to add some more to the 170,000 doses. But so far, we have not been able to access vaccines in the way we anticipated. Suppliers, the large suppliers and the major countries have bought up all the supplies, and the suppliers are telling us that they are unable to access orders from us because of their commitment to those who have access to those vaccines. So you will see a strong statement from CARICOM on this, and you will see a repeat of the call to the WHO in the face of this development, which WHO is aware of, and I dare say the UN, that we need some international response to the complaints of CARICOM and similar nations. And in terms of purchasing, we have we've advanced quite further with the offer from the African Medical Supplies Platform. There's an arrangement there where we have all agreed to put in our request for what we can have from them. We are required to pay, and all countries are required to pay so that the shipment can be made, and we have committed to do that in such a way as to allow them to assist us in the way to share the vaccines that they are getting. They are getting because they are one of the bloc. The African bloc is one large bloc, and we are aiming to get some from there. We also heard from PAHO, how PAHO is hoping to attract enough vaccines or larger volumes to the COVAX tranche by expecting a response from the suppliers into the PAHO chain, so that when we get our first supplies from between now and April from the COVAX, that we'll continue to receive other tranches that will take us through the year. So that was one of the major things that we discussed, and we agree that whoever gets vaccines will share as much as we are able to with those who do not have, because it appears as though for a while we would not be able to access vaccines as we had anticipated. It's a very difficult environment, and we are in fact being squeezed in the way I've just described.
Thank you. Can I proceed,
Yes, Prime
Mr.
Minister.
Muncie?
Yes, ready to proceed with my other question now? Yes. In terms of the regional response for the resurgence of tourism, let me premise that by adding that our regional aviation sector has been quite hard hit. What is the plan to ensure a sustainable regional connectivity post-COVID?
I think I might like to ask my colleague from Dominica to begin to answer that question, being one of the territories in the Eastern Caribbean. Prime Minister Skerrit, can you begin to respond to that?
Yes, Chairman. There was some discussion today on this, not in extreme detail, and of course, in regards to the regional travel, we have Caribbean Airlines based in Trinidad. We have been seeking to have Liat fly. Obviously, it has been affected by the drop in passengers traveling within the region as a result of the restrictions. Air Antilles is also operating. Inter-Caribbean is also operating. So the idea of, I think once we get the COVID-19 situation under control, we will see people traveling again. And of course, the vaccines will be a very important part of us getting back to some level of normalcy. And I think within CARICOM, we have even challenged ourselves to say that the next conference of heads, we look forward to meeting face-to-face in Antigua and Barbuda, and working towards that timetable to ensure that we continue to take all actions at our national and regional levels to get our countries back into a situation where we can move freely. So I believe once we are able to get the COVID-19 situation under control, we eliminate or minimize the need for quarantine to the extent that we have had to put in place in our respective countries. We will see the resurgence of travel and, of course, the presence of air transportation. So I think for now, our focus ought to be addressing the COVID-19 situation. There's surges in some countries, and we've had to take some additional actions to minimize the spread within those respective countries by way of national government action. And of course, the issue of developing a common tourism promotion plan that was presented by Bahamas and supported by all of us, that we need to create a West Indies brand. As was indicated by the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, we are known as the West Indies. The University of the West Indies has indicated West Indies cricket, and I think it's important for us to start promoting this definition of ourselves as the West Indies, rather than the Caribbean, which extends way beyond the CARICOM grouping. Thank you.
Thank you,
Just
Prime Minister.
may I just add that because we are seeing the priority role that our focus should have on the coping with the vaccine and its supply and its its benefits if we do get ourselves properly inoculated is that it will allow us to travel again. And against that background and what we know of what's happening in North America with respect to supplies, either some countries being satisfied and others where the main volumes are being utilized, we have taken a decision that the Caribbean community will write directly to our partners in North America, pointing out to them that because of the requirement for us to be healthy here so that they can be healthy, that they have they consider sharing with us some from their sources so that we too can very quickly take control of the virus, because we fear that if we wait too long to get our supplies, there's always this danger that variations can take place within our borders here, and that will then undo what they're doing in inoculating their populations. And because we are so close, sharing the same space, and economically, if anything's going to happen to improve our economics, we need to travel, we need to open our borders, but that is predicated on us all being properly vaccinated so that we'll have the same level of health within our countries. So those letters will go off from CARICOM to our neighbors in the north in that context.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to recognize the following journalists in this order: Renoka Singh, Vendrika Percival, Julian Rogers, and Peter Richards. Renoka, start with you.
Hi, good afternoon. Renoka Singh from the Trinidad Guardian. On February 10th, there was a tweet from CARICOM Secretariat thanking Indian Prime Minister Modi for the pledge of 500,000 vaccines to CARICOM members. Can someone provide an updated list of the countries that benefited from that donation? And can you say whether that information of that donation was properly circulated among the CARICOM membership?
That issue came up yesterday, and up to yesterday, in response to a request to get an answer to that, the answer was that there has really not been a document or an offer to any one country like that. What has happened is that different people were spoken to by different ambassadors, and there was a bit of a difference with respect to what the commitment was. And in fact, some commitments were actually met. There was no singular offer of 500,000 vaccines, but there were gifts to two countries, Dominica 70,000 doses and Barbados 100,000 doses, and continued contact with India. Today, we were told by other heads that the contact with India, other offers have been made at different levels of confirmation. So in short, the contact with India has allowed some vaccines to come into the region, as we have mentioned earlier on, 100,000 doses and 170,000 doses. And there are promises of some more, and of course, the possibility of purchase of vaccines if the suppliers who are making those vaccines for larger countries in India accept our orders and agree to sell. Right now, those who have made contact with those suppliers, of which I think there's only one that is approved at this stage, and there's another to come if it gets the approval. But the bottom line is that the government of India has made some vaccines available, for which we have acknowledged and thanked them very sincerely. We anticipate some more, and we are also maintaining our contact there to see if we can purchase some more and receive whatever they would want to offer along the way. So that's what the situation is. But there was never an offer of 500,000 that we were all tapping into, as was published in the early days.
Thank you, Chairman. I recognize Tandrika Percival.
Good evening. This is Tandika Percival, Stabrook News. Mr. Chair, we've heard that the Cuban government is working to develop a vaccine. Has there been any discussions between the community and that state about possibly accessing vaccines from them if it is successfully developed? And also, have there been discussions within the community about any main points of engagement with the Biden administration?
Let me answer the first one. The CARICOM region has a number of heads who are in close communication with the government of Cuba. And what was yesterday discussed and what came out very clearly is that virtually all, bar probably 2 states, indicated that they would only use vaccines which are approved by the WHO. And of course, while we know that Cuba has a good reputation in the medical sphere and is developing some vaccines, unless those vaccines get WHO approval, all CARICOM countries have indicated that we'll await such an approval before we attempt to use it in our populations. But we do have contact with Cuba at different levels, and once that approval is had, we are pretty certain that we'll be able to access it given the friendly nature of our countries. But until that approval is had, we do not see Cuba as a supplier of vaccine to most of our population. And the other part that you mentioned was to engage the new administration in the United States. Yes, a very specific decision has been taken for that to happen, and it is happening. Some of us, and we also agree that we shouldn't just aim to do that contact at the level of the presidency, but at other levels of the Congress and elsewhere in the U.S. administration, where we do have various contacts ongoing.
Before I bring in,
if I may follow up, would it be possible for you to highlight for us, aside from COVID-19, what are the agenda items you hope to raise with the new administration?
Well, the main thing, which is the main and most immediate thing, is the vaccine accessibility, access to vaccines. That's urgent. Secondly, we are still very concerned about the risk of having our banking system being de-risked or debanked. And I think only this week, another one of our territories have suffered that action. And we are also concerned about the EU arbitrary designation of our communities and our nations as not collaborating or cooperating with international standards for banking and are arbitrarily blacklisting us. So that's another major area of our concern. And of course, security with respect to the influx of arms and ammunition into a region which are largely made in the United States. So these are some of the issues that we hope to engage in very early, as soon as we make contact with the functionaries in the new administration.
Okay, before I bring in Julian, just want to alert you, Mr. Chairman, that
Thank you very much. Thank you. Great job.
On Thursday at the Gordon Center for Simulation and Innovation in Medical.
And we will, and he is able to hear us and to participate. Just alerting, Mr. Chairman.
Moderator, could we just check to see if the president of Guyana is with us? He was supposed to be part of this panel, but we did have some technical difficulties. So for my benefit, I'd like to know if
Mr. Chairman, he's now hearing us, and he's now we are now able to hear him.
Okay, thank you very much. Could we continue? Thank you for that. Yes, could we have the question?
Friend. Investigators say 21-year-old Persephone Brassfield went to the home on 195th Street, Northwest 39th Avenue last.
Okay, well, let me, we're not hearing you, Julian, so let me ask you to hold on, and I'll bring in Peter Richards.
Dangerous chase along I-95 appeared before a judge today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I hope I am on, because I'm still seeing Julian still showing up on the...
Yes, you're on.
Am I on? Okay, yes, good evening, Prime Minister Rowley, Chairman of CARICOM, and the other members of the head table. Dr. Rowley, you did indicate at the start that President Moise of Haiti made a report on the alleged, as you put it,
Crews
instability
worked through the nights, and they were able to finish repairs.
Julian's TV is cutting. Julian has a TV on, which is cutting in.
I think Julian is, are you hearing me? Am I being
Yes,
heard?
Peter.
Okay, like I said, at the start, you did say that the President Moise of Haiti made a report to CARICOM on the alleged instability in the country. I want to find out from CARICOM, what is CARICOM's new position regarding Haiti, one, given the fact that the Americans, the United States, is calling on Haiti to hold fresh elections. Two, the United Nations Security Council has also expressed some reservations about the ongoing situation in Haiti. And then you have the opposition in Haiti saying it does not recognize President Moise. Further, if I could ask this question of the CARICOM Secretary General, what is the position regarding the CARICOM office that used to operate out of Haiti?
Okay, we do not have an office operating out of Haiti as we had before, in the way we had before. And as a result of that, one of the decisions we took today was to have our ambassador, Colin Granderson, from whatever virtual mechanisms available to us, to do a report for heads on the situation in Haiti, which would allow us to compare what we were told by the president as to what other people will tell us. And we did today, after we met with after we had the intervention by President Moise, agree to issue a very strong statement of call for CARICOM standards to be observed in Haiti, Haiti being a CARICOM country, and that the long delayed elections be held, and we look forward to presidential elections to be held in keeping with the Constitution of Haiti. That very clear and firm statement would be coming out in the package that you will get a little later on. So there is a CARICOM statement which is in keeping with what you would have heard from the United Nations and other countries that subscribe to CARICOM principles.
But if I may follow up quickly, President Moise has made it clear, even though he's ruling by decree, that his term of office expires in February next year and not February this year, as the opposition is claiming. It would mean, therefore, that there will be instability and uncertainty going forward in Haiti. Are CARICOM countries prepared to wait until February next year, or are they willing to, or are they urging Haiti to hold elections as soon as possible?
We are urging Haiti to do what you just said, which is to hold elections as soon as possible in keeping with the Constitution of Haiti. Some of the difficulty has to do with the interpretation as to what the Constitution says or does. And I think that adjudication is where the intervention of assisting international bodies and international partners would help Haiti along the way to get to that position of having the elections held without further disturbance and instability.
Okay, I just want to give Julian a chance to come back in and see if he can get in this time. Over to you, Julian.
Will be hearing me this time?
Loud and clear. Please proceed.
All right. So, good afternoon, Prime Ministers.
Good afternoon, Julian.
I want to ask you, Prime Minister, if you would spend a little more time on this vaccine situation, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about it. I think that one of the things to be clarified for a lot of ordinary people really is when they hear that we get the Indian vaccine, they're convinced that that is some Indian concoction rather than the AstraZeneca, etc. That's one area. And I would like to ask you as well.
Before you go to area 2, let's answer area 1 first. I think it might be a little clearer. And then I'll take another question after that. It's important that we understand that this label of Indian vaccine or British vaccine, what is happening is that there are certain companies that have the technology, made the breakthroughs, with respect to vaccines that are useful in fighting the COVID infection. One of those companies is AstraZeneca, which is an American company. But the vaccine for AstraZeneca is made in India because, as you know, India has a tremendous infrastructure for making medicines and medication. That's quite normal and common. So the COVID vaccine for which AstraZeneca is authorized, the approved AstraZeneca vaccine, is made in India. And from that standpoint, it may be referred to as the Indian vaccine. But that's what misleads some people. What has happened is that once the vaccines became approved, they then became in demand and in short supply because there isn't enough vaccine to go around for everybody who needs it, and the vaccine is being made at a countries with deep pockets and great influence have contracted the early production of this vaccine and similar ones in some of the bigger countries. So that what is the vaccine that is made in India is transported out of India to other countries who have paid or contracted for it at this time. So what we have been experiencing as small countries with small pockets, when we make contact with those companies, like the one that is doing it in India, you are being told, as we are being told, we are unable to take an order from you. However, there are other companies who have got approvals, but they too are contracted by the countries that had the influence to pay and to contract the original supplies. What some of those countries have been saying to us, okay, we can give you a small amount, we can sell you a small amount, but only if your order is up to a certain size. And one of the conditions under which they attempt to sell us is that it has to be in a confidential arrangement, meaning that we are not going to expose what we've been charged for it. What we've discovered in that arrangement is that different people can be charged hugely different prices and required by contract to keep those prices confidential. And that is the environment in which the vaccine access and purchase is now. That's what we are facing now. And therefore, the vaccine that is called the Indian vaccine could easily be called the American vaccine made in India, which is being used in America and which we are going to be using here because that is the vaccine that COVAX through PAHO is getting for us during the month of March. So that, I hope that clarifies something for you, Julian.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And a quick one. A lot of the discussions we've had over recent times revolve around the matter of the bubble which was set up originally for Caribbean people to be moving around, etc. And the complaint that I've heard is that it would seem that CARICOM has failed to hold together as far as the bubble is concerned. In other words, where one country apparently had a spike and another had a country that had a spike, and we started to literally ban each other from each other's territories. And I would just follow that up by saying, or asking, have the heads looked again at re-implementing the kind of protocols that we had back in 2007 for Cricket World Cup?
Before I answer that, let me just correct something here. AstraZeneca is trading in North America, but it's really a British-Swedish company, but it's providing its service in America. So I want to correct that. Yes, Julian, this whole question of the CARICOM bubble was more fiction and fantasy. From a practical standpoint, there was never any CARICOM bubble. What you had were a number of countries desperately seeking to protect their populations and took a series of similar or different decisions. A bubble, the best bubble that we've had in the Caribbean was the bubble that we used in Trinidad to facilitate the CPL conference, where people came in with a certain amount of health protocols in place, physical movement, contact restrictions, and kept sanitized throughout in a hotel that was only open to such persons. That's a bubble. because we did have territories that either kept their airports open, didn't keep the airports closed long enough, or you had people moving in and out. Once people were moving around, there couldn't have been a bubble. And in fact, some of the difficulties that we try to protect ourselves from were penetrated by our inability to keep people who might have been bringing to us infections from the areas they were coming. And all our countries were exposed to that. And the practicality of a bubble, or the failure to have this so-called bubble, is not a CARICOM failure. If you look at countries like South Africa, a large country, in their country, they had restrictions of whether you could go from one point to another, and there were different protocols in different places. The same thing happened in Australia. In Australia, they had separate conditions for different parts of the country. In the United Kingdom, in the United States. So if you had some differences between Bahamas and Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados and St. Lucia, it was the same kind of arrangement trying to fight the virus while living with it. But once you had movement and the restriction of movement and the stifling of the virus by lockdowns or transfers of goods and services, we all were doing it the same way. So in short, there was never any CARICOM bubble. It was just something that was imagined but was never operationalized because it was so logistically difficult to do that.
Thank you. And Chairman, as I
Thank you,
said
Prime Minister.
before, we've not been able to sort the problem, the technical issues that we had with linking in President Ali. So I'd like to bring him in now to share his views on the outcomes of the meeting, followed by the Secretary General, Ambassador Wanloro.
Could I ask President Ali, as you have the floor, to give our presentation on the agricultural initiatives which we discussed today?
Thank you very much, Chair and Prime Minister Rowley. Well, as Prime Minister Rowley would have alluded to, we had quite an extensive discussion on agriculture in the context of food security, commercialization, and mainstreaming our agricultural output in national policy formulation. We had, as I said, extensive discussion, and the discussions were aimed at looking at the entire value chain in terms of creating wealth, creating business opportunities, whilst at the same time improving our capacity and our output and making agribusiness sustainable for the region and moving towards greater food security. To achieve this, we discussed responsibilities of governments within the region and the region itself in terms of the way we craft our national budget, ensuring that we outline targets, strategic targets in our national budget to support agricultural development, to support increase in yield, to support agribusiness and agri-processing. We discussed various incentive mechanisms in the report. We looked at where our competitive edge and advantages are. We looked at our competitors and to see where the differentials are and how we can actually build a model that help us to mitigate those differentials and lead us to competitiveness. We look at some of the barriers affecting interregional trade and movement of our agricultural products, and we have established those barriers, and we have decided that we're going to work through a ministerial task force, the private sector organizations, and also through our subcommittee on CSME to come up with an action plan, not only to remove those barriers, but to identify some specific areas, some specific products, for example, poultry, the poultry industry, where we can develop a strategic approach to achieve the outcomes I spoke of. We spoke of the transportation network, how we can better improve transportation within the region, mobilization of international resources or comparatives as different states, and how it can help us in our collective advantage. We looked at, discussed ways of which we can create an easier environment for agribusiness, involvement of young people, access to capital, and looking at legislation nationally and then regionally in dealing with dumping and anti-dumping measures. We looked at the opportunities and the forward and backward linkages for the agricultural sector. Again, if you look at poultry, the input for feed production, corn, soya, protein material, and then the output, processed meats and so on. These are all business opportunities that has to be really led by the private sectors, as Prime Minister Rowley put it, but has to be supported with an enabling environment. So what we did in this regard is to build off the many studies that were there historically and moving now towards an action-oriented agenda with specific targets that we would like to achieve. So in the context of this, the agricultural, what we sought to do was to examine a strategy that fits into the global context, that look at policy formulation at the national level, at the regional level, build on the political will of our leaders and the region to get this going, ensuring that it's mainstream in our national planning system, and to work in identifying the systemic support that is needed to boost agriculture as a business opportunity, and look at the commercialization of agriculture as a whole. Or in this context, we're looking at shared market, shared prosperity, and look at ways in which we can also integrate agriculture with other sectoral development. For example, energy, agriculture and energy. So there was a lot of discussion surrounding these areas, and as Prime Minister Rowley said, we have agreed to the establishment of a ministerial task force that will meet with the private sector and the subcommittee of CSME to develop an actionable plan with targets in moving this forward. Thank you.
May I add that we did have an input from Mr. Gervais, owner of Neil and Massey, a regional business house, which is quite prominent, and we were comforted to hear from him that once the action plan identifies the specific areas that we are going to focus on with respect to becoming competitive or adding our own local inputs into production, that the private sector is confident that they could raise the funding that is required to facilitate the movement from report and expectation to hands in the soil in producing these matters on the scale at which we are aiming to do, to be able to produce large volumes of our requirements in a either competitive or semi-competitive arrangement.
Thank you, Chairman, and may I invite the Secretary General to provide his perspective on the meeting.
Thank you very much, Kendall. I just want to add maybe to what Prime Minister just said, and as well as President Ali and Prime Minister Skerry, is that the involvement of the private sector. We have created a framework of a CSM. We have always said that the private sector and the citizens of CARICOM are the ones who take advantage of that opportunity. We have seen the private sector through the CARICOM Private Sector Organization, which the heads have conferred status of associate institution, very active, not only in the discussions today on the CSME and on agriculture, as President Ali has shown, but also in subcommittees working on, for instance, the review of the common external tariff. And one of the points that was made is that we have to look at what are the barriers that may be in place, whether it's by way of we don't have mutual recognition of companies, we don't have a central registry of companies, and those sort of things that could induce greater investment into the particular sectors that we have identified. The private sector has said to us, once the framework is fully there and operational, that they will come with the investment resources to create the backward and forward linkages, the value-added chains, the value chains that President Ali mentioned would also be there. That kind of discussion also took place in the tourism sector. Prime Minister Skerrit mentioned the tourism sector. The task force that was appointed consisted of the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association, which is private sector, the Caribbean Tourism Organization, of course, the CARICOM Secretariat and the OECS Secretariat, to look at a framework, a policy framework in the very short term in terms of reviving the tourism industry, but in the medium to long term, and the branding that Prime Minister Skerrit has mentioned, but also the linkages between agriculture and tourism, the linkages between tourism and manufacturing. So that is a holistic approach to the economic development, not isolated sectors, but how they integrate into each other. I think that was a highlight of the discussions that we had today in the various sectors and in the framework of the CSME. And to also mention that we had an exchange with the civil societies through the Caribbean CPDC, Caribbean Policy Development Center, of which they were very appreciative to be part of the discussion. And I'm sure we'll be hearing more from them as the discussions advance. I think that was a major highlight, is that we've created the framework. What do we do to facilitate the private sector? And nuts and bolts, Prime Minister Rowley has mentioned it, action plan. President Ali has mentioned it, action plan. What are the steps to get this thing actioned? We also had a discussion on taking advantage of the opportunity that COVID has provided us through the information and communication technology. We're seeing that it can be done. We've always had on our books to advance a single ICT space, and COVID has forced us to use the technology more and more. How can we ride that and give it urgency literally in the next few months and come back to the heads of government again with an action plan on how we're going to achieve some of the things we want to do? Why is it that roaming charges, a call between Barbados and St. Lucia or Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago, is so costly? Why can't we have lower roaming charges? Why can't we have lower rates for our internet providers so that internet can truly be ubiquitous throughout our region? And so our discussions were had, and the conference has charged the lead head with regards to ICT to take this forward and report back on an action plan again to heads when they meet next. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. And just want to say that to the journalists that we are quickly running out of time. I just want to ask the chairman to give some concluding comments, and then we'll have to wrap today's press conference.
Thank you.
But Chairman, before you give your concluding remarks, I wanted to publicly, in the presence of the media, commend you for your chairmanship today. I felt you brought a sense of reason to the discussion, but also very importantly, look into the future. And I think that we discussed and we took some very important decisions that if we're able to implement, the region will be much better off for it. And of course, our citizens would see the benefits of those actions and those decisions which we took. But I really want to commend you in the presence of the media for your extraordinary chairmanship over the last 2 days. I've never seen heads so engaged in a 2-day session like this with a very heavy agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Skerrit. I just want to say that we did have a successful 2-day meeting, and the use of the technology has allowed us to maximize the effort. And we are hoping that the decisions that we've taken would allow us to move from a lot of the planning to actioning some of the things that we wanted to do a long time ago. And also the force of the COVID against us has changed our priorities. Where we were going at a walking pace, the requirement to treat with COVID and to plan a post-COVID environment is making a demand on us to accelerate our Caribbeanness or CARICOM expectations. And this should all go well for the CSME. We spoke about expanding the movement of persons of skills, the mention of the agricultural workers and other persons who are vital to any successful improvement in the areas that we are talking about. And we also took the opportunity to commit to find our own resources and to bring them to the fore. But there are a number of bureaucratic decisions that have to be made to allow such things to happen. And the use of ICT and digitalization is an integral requirement if we are going to be successful. But the mood of the meeting was upbeat, that we could do some of these things now based on the foundations that we have had and the decisions that we are taking. So we are anxious to be tested, and I trust that we would be not found wanting. This meeting, I am very pleased. I've been to very many CARICOM meetings, but this one, I think I feel that we can make some, the circumstances are driving us to some positives that might have escaped us before. So thank you all very much for your cooperation with the chair and with Trinidad and Tobago's effort. And we look forward very soon to having a vaccinated CARICOM region, which will allow us to open our borders and begin to move around again, because that would be the best measure of any semblance of normalcy returning to our economy and to our lives. Thank you very much.